So are there other people that have special abilities? Well, there is Dean, who is able to have aerobic endurance. He is able to run 50 marathons in 50 consecutive days in 50 states. And after that, he's not even very tired, so he's going to run back home from New York to California. And when we measure his CPKs, the measurement of inflammation of his muscles in his blood after 25 marathons, after 25 consecutive days, his CPKs are 477, whereas somebody who runs just one marathon is over 2,000 CPKs. How spectacular is this? If we could find what this man has, couldn't that be wonderful? We could give this power to our military. That would be wonderful. Other cases? Well, there is here, this little girl here is Brooke. And guess how old she is? She is 20 years old. 20 years old. And she weighs 16 pounds. And she has a body of a 9-month-old toddler. What does she have? So it's called Syndrome X. We don't really know what it is. We're still trying to solve. She actually passed away 3 years ago. But what is it? Is it a genetic abnormality? Is it a protein that is silenced or a protein overexpressed? We don't know, but we're trying to discover this, because if we discover this, if we could stay at the same age, imagine, instead of 9 months old, if we could stay at 20 years old, have the 20-year-old body and face for the rest of our life, how wonderful would that be? How successful would that company be? How worth investing in that company would it be? Yeah, it could be that the people would die a little bit sooner, it's true, but I know a lot of women would be ready to do that just to stay at 20 years old. There is also this boy here is a human chimera. He's got 4 sets of genes. 2 sets here and 2 sets there. And they don't reject each other. Normally it should be 2 sets of genes. Why don't they reject each other? And could that, if we find out why, could that be used for organ transplants? Probably. How about this man is a neurologist, and he has mirror touch synesthesia, which means that if I go see him, and as I'm seeing him, I bang my head suddenly, he's going to feel pain in his head too, at the same time as me. If I bang my knee, he's going to feel pain in his left knee too. And maybe one of you is like this. Did you feel pain in your left knee too? Well, if you did, you have mirror touch synesthesia. But by understanding what is happening with that, maybe we could understand more what's happening with people that are more empathic, have more empathy. Also, maybe it could be used in show business. When you go to see a movie, you can take a little pill, and then you can feel exactly what the hero is feeling. Except that if the hero dies, that's not so good. So maybe not. Other cases. There is Derek. Okay, Derek was a homeless. Just had no ability of doing anything, could not read music. When he decided, that was a dumb idea, to dive headfirst in a shallow pool. And what happened? He had a strong concussion, right? When he got out of the hospital, suddenly he could play 8 musical instruments. He became a virtuoso of music. That is called acquired savant syndrome. There are several cases like this, although not all people do like this. So I would strongly recommend against diving head first in a very shallow pool because it doesn't work for everybody. You might want to unlock the genius within, but you might want to find other ways to do this. And maybe the way to do this would be through meditation. Because this indicates us tells us that there is one part of the brain that is inhibitory, that inhibits another part of the brain. And when the inhibitory part of the brain gets silenced, then the other part of the brain can develop to its full potential. So can we create this? Maybe, again, meditation could silence a part of our brain just by being more peaceful, and that actually can create, develop the other part of our brain. But maybe something else, maybe there is another way to do this. So to me, those cases are very dear to me because they are simple. They use biology. They use things that already exist, that are rare cases, but they exist. They show us it's possible, and they give us a glimpse into the future so that we know that if we work on those, we can create this kind of thing in the future. And maybe if you do your own research, you can have full power of detecting, what the next biotechnology firm is going to be that will be successful. So much in the Dataverse that is accessible to us just right there, right now. But talking about investing a little bit more, here is Eric.
Yeah, it occurred to us that some of you might have more than a casual interest in applying these tools to figuring out which securities to buy or sell. And so we took a look at that. And what we found was kind of interesting. There are two journals that are preeminent in science. One is called Science, and the other is called Nature. And some economists recently published their findings in Nature, and they asked the question, could you look at social media and Google and see patterns of behavior in the population that would predict stock market moves? And what they found is they came up with a list of 40 candidate words that had relationship, equity, debt, PE multiple, the normal things that you think about. And they tested them in a regression analysis, and what they found is by far the most predictive word was debt. And they looked at Google search interest, here being red meaning a strong interest, a decrease in interest, and average interest. And what they found is that very frequently, right before a big downturn in the market, there was a spike in interest for debt, search interest for debt. So the question is, can you convert this to alpha? What do you think? Well, let's take a look. So here you see the results of a buy and hold strategy, an index strategy, and if you had gone back retroactively, of course, and you had built a portfolio based on just looking at Wikipedia and Google, because Wikipedia gives you a very similar pattern, you see you get major alpha by doing this. So I'm imagining your quants may already know this, or maybe they don't know this. But this is an example, again, of the democratization, where it doesn't necessarily take a lot of sophisticated quants to give you ideas about what to do in the market. So moving back into the business realm, we're going to give you one last example of applying these techniques to marketing. Dr. Chris.
Eric and I wrote a book on integrative medicine, self-help, and wellness. And we were wondering, when should we launch our book? And we said, well, let's look at Google Trends. Let's look at Google search interest over time on self-help and wellness. And here we see there are peaks, and there are peaks in January. This is awesome. That means we need to launch our book in January. Now, can we learn more from Google? Can we use Google Correlate? And what correlates the most with wellness? Maybe we should put a chapter on that. And what correlates the most with wellness is food with. So that means we probably need to put a big chapter on diet and nutrition. Now, how should we distribute our book? Again, let's use Google Correlate. And we go, where do we see, what is the strongest correlation with integrative medicine? It is physical therapy. So that means we're going to distribute our book through a physical therapist. And that will have to work. So, now, we've covered the dataverse at large with no preconception. And the key here is no preconception. We had an open mind. Because if we have preconception, we're going to look for something. But if we have no preconception, we're going to see even things that don't make sense. And the things that don't make sense especially could be very interesting. And we surfaced unexpected connections. Connections between cardiovascular disease and immune function. Connection between mental health and leukemia. Between glioblastoma and the hygiene hypothesis. And photobiology. We also looked at the art of the possible in extremely rare biology. And we studied a little bit of marketing.
Yeah, and before I wrap up, I want to just point out something that Isaac Asimov once said about science. He said, science doesn't proceed with eureka, but with, that's funny. And we found a lot of, that's funny. Because we are generalists and somewhat amateur, we do have a subject matter expert in medicine, and I know a little bit about neuroscience. But generally, we are generalists. And the fact that if you look in your businesses, things are getting narrower and narrower and deeper, aren't they? And that is a power, but that also is a weakness. Because what it does is it blinds you to things that cut across those stovepipes. And if I had to give you one major lesson from the Dataverse, it's you have to look for the connections. Because those are the things that can be the most powerful. As Asimov said, there's a lot of that's funny out there. Just to point out that we think we can do some election forecasting with these simple, democratized tools, technology forecasting, and as we just talked about, investment. I think my own personal view, and I'm not sure how much Chris agrees with this, but I think probably the most exciting thing to me is that in going out there into the Dataverse, we found all sorts of disparate things, but because Google is so good at showing seasonality, what really hits you right in the face is the seasonality of all these diseases. And we know that light has the effect on nitrous oxide, on vitamin D, on the immune system, on inflammation. And so even dermatologists are starting to relook at how much sunlight you should get. But I think, what is a big thing in medicine right now? What is the hot meme that you hear in health and wellness? The biome, right? Your gut bacteria, you've all heard. She was talking about fecal transplants, which, by the way, can be very important for a whole sort of diseases to reset your hygiene hypothesis, to train your immune system to do things. And again, there could be investment opportunities. It can be personally important to each of you. But I think that it could be that photobiology is that next big thing, that we're not creating this wave, but we may have discovered it before anybody else. And is that sort of thing important for investing? Maybe. Maybe not. So we'll want to wrap up by giving an idea of where we think all this is going in the future. Well, a year ago, I got this off the internet, and it shows all the different open data sets that are out there in different flavors. You hear social network, meaning, linguistics, linked data sets, and so forth. And there's open data, typically RDF, AL, SQL, and other structures like that, that allow you to connect the dots. So these are the dots, and then these are the connections of the dots. So this is just a snapshot of a year ago, and I'm certain that it's exploded even more. So one way to look at all this.
So this is an astronomer's reconstruction of the evolution of the universe, starting with the Big Bang.
Wouldn't it have been exciting to be there when that happened? That would have been awesome, better than any 4th of July, right? Guess what? Excuse me. Guess what? You are there. Because that is exactly what the Dataverse is doing. It's exploding exponentially. And wouldn't it be exciting to explore in this new space? Well, guess what? We're going to do that right now. We're going to take a little break, I guess. Maybe a few minutes break. And then when we come back, when we ask you to think about is do the same thing that I asked Chris to do when I asked her to give me glioblastoma, or we asked the doctors about stroke. What are you curious about? Because we're going to show you some of the tools that we and Ivor here have developed. And we're going to let you go on an expedition and explore the Dataverse with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Any questions? Yes, Ike.